If you're only planning for chaos, what happens if you never get it? Like the idea of being a warrior in a garden, that's all great, as long as that's not the only thing you're able to do. Warrior job openings just aren't what they used to be. The idea that you need to prepare for bad times, for the coming storm, in general is a good idea, I suppose. You want to be prepared for a sudden loss of income, for some kind of illness, or I don't know, a broken back. But there's always going to be hype out there encouraging you to take that idea a little bit too far. So, like preparing for a possible storm, if that means you lose out in any other situation, well, that's how you end up holding a bag of $50 silver. And this isn't meant to be a rip on silver, that just happens to be the asset with the wildest hype. I would say it's great to have some, but not great to go crazy on buying it at a loss, hoping to make that up in volume. Now give me a minute to explain that part. Before we get back to it, if you're looking for precious metals, hit up SD Bullion. New customers even get gold and silver for spot. That's sdbullion.com/new. What I'm pointing at here is the difference between practical planning and paying a fantasy tax. If you're putting things you might need for an emergency aside, accumulating them over time, not causing yourself financial stress to do it, well, that's practical planning in my opinion. But if you're buying in a frenzy at prices that you'll only make back in a bigger frenzy, well, that's the opposite of practical. It's more like taxing yourself to plan around somebody's story. It's a fantasy tax. Now, I see comments about silver being a better value than gold, and it's not true if you use actual historical facts. It's only true if some future story ends up becoming true. So, true if something else is true. That's a little bit like saying anything is possible. So let's give that part a rest for a minute. This isn't silver's fault, and the hype is not exclusive to silver. We're going to jump to gold. Now, all of my decisions for buying gold are based on what has happened, so again, actual historical performance, and what I think can happen, what I think will happen. The difference there is that I try to buy in a way that'd be beneficial regardless of one type of event occurring. In other words, I don't want its value moored on some kind of collapse. I want to think through how it would perform in either situation, good or bad, because we're going to have both. Now, let me give you an example. I think the price of gold is going to make a run once the Fed changes gears, and I would guess that'll happen in 2024. But if the Fed is switching gears because year-over-year inflation numbers are back in a comfortable range, and switching gears means rates come back down, well, the thing that could spike the price of gold in the first place could also lead to its eventual pullback. Now, the reason for the spike would be US dollar strength falling in general terms. Specifically, though, falling treasury yields would mean less competition for gold. You'll hear about carry cost, and that gets to the basic idea that gold is a non-yielding asset. So if a short-term bond or bill pays 5%, your carry cost for holding gold is also 5%. It's an oversimplification, of course, but at 5-ish%, well, gold has pretty heavy competition. But as interest rates fall, those yields fall, competition falls, and gold hypothetically goes up. Now you take that same situation and you just expand it out a little bit further, and things could change. The falling rates and the loose money could lead to a wider sense that maybe things are good again. So who needs gold? So it's a good example of how preparing for one situation could put you behind in another. Preparing only for bad times could bite you in good times. And that's always going to happen a little bit. So depending on how you look at it, it's still good planning, making hay while the sun shines in moderation. But if you take that to extremes and you go all in on an asset you only expect to perform in a huge event, like a US dollar currency collapse, well, you might be paying more for the asset than you could ever sell it for any other time. That's when you consider premiums and carry costs. Now, don't get me wrong here. As you can see, I'm a big proponent of gold. I have a channel on this stuff. I'm long on it. But the idea of going at it or any asset too hard for extreme edge cases leads to expensive decisions. It's been my critique of a lot of the silver propaganda. I think it's good to have a little bit of silver, but I'm not going to pay high premiums to have a lot of it hoping for or expecting some kind of wide-scale collapse to send the price to the moon, or whatever other possible case is floating around at the moment right now. Like I said, it's the idea that silver could become extinct. Buy silver now before you can't get it anymore. People say whatever they want because anything is possible. So like I said, this isn't just a silver thing. Anytime a bank fails somewhere in the world, there's going to be a YouTuber telling you about it. Get your money out of the bank, buy gold instead. We've seen that it's a popular story, but if we were to take out the revolving door of hype, just look at what's actually happening, actual conditions, we're going to see central banks actively buying it, and most of them actually holding large quantities in reserve. So when I say I think it makes sense to have a non-zero position in gold, that I think it works as a good savings model, that view does not require some kind of catastrophic event to become true. You don't need a full-on banking collapse or World War III for that gold to be valuable. So if you plan for some volatility and a case where you might even need to sell when the world isn't collapsing, well, you've probably made conscious decisions on when to buy. So over time, that asset that you've been accumulating is just always going to be valuable. So my plan here is pretty simple. If I'm working toward a goal, I buy as budget allows, trying to avoid obvious spikes, trying to ignore obvious hype, but I'm still buying regularly. I'm hoping to average out my costs. Now, if I'm at pace with a running goal, meaning I have what I feel is enough at the moment, I'm a lot more opportunistic. I'm going to buy on dips. I'm going to slow down on spikes. If we look at the Israeli conflict, well, that's spiking gold price right now. We saw something similar when Russia invaded Ukraine last year. And that spike in price from 2022 topped after only a few weeks, and then it began to fall. The hype spin, though, tells us it's only going to get worse, and there are conditions where it could, but it's presented as if it's happening. The end is near. You need to buy more now. If you looked at this last weekend when a lot of people were saying this is only getting worse, well, the price of gold was 8% higher than it was just a few weeks ago. Today, the price is already starting to come down, and who knows what the trend is, but that's what I'm talking about. Don't get caught up in these one-sided stories. If we wanted to drop that down to one idea, it would be to focus on probability rather than possibility. Normal is more probable, slow decline is more probable than waking up to fire and brimstone. And a lot of cases might not even have a clear winner in terms of probability. You can have good times and bad times. It just depends on timing. Now, if you're careful, though, about your planning to begin with, you're covered for both. And I would say that's practical planning in a nutshell. So let's call it good there. Let us know what you're up to. Do you only buy gold or silver for Mad Max SHTF scenario planning, or is there more to it? Would you still buy it if you weren't expecting a world where we're all running around in football pads eating dog food? Let us know. And then while you're in the comments, be sure to hit that like button if you found any of this interesting. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you'd like to see more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.